Now, for more on President Obama's day in the Kenyan capital, including the post-Obama Kenyatta meeting press conference, we return now to Africa 54's Vincent Makori in Nairobi. Vincent, could you share some of the highlights of the summit?
Well, you can say almost like what you just mentioned. I think the most important thing is that President Obama did highlight the fact that corruption can be very expensive, particularly for entrepreneurs who are trying to do business, and therefore there is a need for governments, and particularly the government of Kenya, to fight corruption as a way of encouraging entrepreneurs and making it easier and cheaper for them to implement their great ideas. But I think perhaps for me the most important thing it did mention is about investing in women, and that women being the powerhouses, critical in the African continent, where many people don't think of women when you're thinking about entrepreneurship. President Obama put the spotlight on that and said there's going to be a lot of investment, and of course with what has already been mentioned, investment in women entrepreneurship centers in Lusaka, Zambia, in Kenya and Mali. I think that was really, really critical. Plus, of course, calling on all to try as much as they can to avail funding for all the young entrepreneurs who are trying to start businesses.
And definitely, as you mentioned, the role of the youth in tomorrow's future in Africa is clear and was clearly stated during this conference. Can you tell us about what they said as it relates to the role of the youth in entrepreneurship in general?
Well, the youth drive entrepreneurship in Africa right now. And as the president said, you see, they provide an alternative. Right now, many people have been looking to government to provide employment. But the young people with all these great ideas are not only employing themselves, but they are creating opportunities for fellow youth, and therefore setting a kind of a model for the future of the African continent, where the focus has been the government, federal employment. But what is critical here is that he's calling on governments to create an enabling environment for the youth to spring forth and make that dash for economic growth for their countries. And so they have the future right here in their hands today. They just need a little boost, a little support from the systems in terms of the building of infrastructure and the finance provision in order to provide the opportunities.
And both presidents had a press conference after the summit later during the day. And let's take a listen to the President Obama's reaction to one question that was asked regarding gay rights.
If somebody is a law-abiding citizen who is going about their business and working in a job and obeying the traffic signs and doing all the other things that good citizens are supposed to do, and not harming anybody, the idea that they are going to be treated differently or abused because of who they love is wrong.
Now, President Kenyatta also had a reaction to this question. Vincent, what can you tell us in terms of what he said generally?
You know, both presidents maintained their positions. President Kenyatta said homosexuality or gayism is a non-issue, and that is not something he wanted to focus on during the visit of President Barack Obama. And therefore, he maintained exactly what he had said before, because that issue had been raised way before President Obama's visit here in Kenya. And so he did not deviate from his position, and he wanted them to focus on what he thinks is more important, that is business and investment and the fight against terrorism in this country, along with stemming other ills in society like corruption and poaching. I don't think there was a major shift from what the two presidents had maintained way before this trip.
Okay, quickly, before we let you go, what is next on the president's agenda? He's going to Ethiopia. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, President Barack Obama will be having a last event tomorrow during the day, addressing Kenyans at the university just outside of Nairobi, and then he will jet out to Addis Ababa. There he will be meeting with African Union leaders. Is expected, of course, to kind of highlight some of the issues of concern. He did mention South Sudan when he was here during his press conference. He mentioned Burundi. You would expect that he will be talking about some of those issues at the AU, and obviously the importance of entrenching democratic values across the continent and fighting against terrorism, along with, of course, hopefully eliminating all the ills that have caused so much suffering for citizens across this continent.
Okay, Vincent Makori, thank you so much for joining us this week. And that was VOA's Vincent Makori reporting live from Nairobi.